How would you describe staking? It's all on Ethereum today because USDC wasn't available until now. If everyone gets 5% interest on treasury bills, then no one is getting 5%. That's like the challenge with staking. For the last couple of months, we've been working more closely with Aave. Although we've worked with them in the past, not RWAs. I think that's, no. I like less trafficked.
It is making it more questionable now with regards to this model that you just spoke about.
Wow.
My name is Claudio and this is Chain. And joining me today is Lucas, CEO and co-founder of Centrifuge, one of the major parachains in the Polkadot ecosystem. Lucas, thank you very much for taking the time to join. I'm really looking forward to talking to you and asking you a lot of questions about Centrifuge. Can you tell us, when did you get started with Web3?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to chatting. Maybe a quick introduction. I worked in Web2 for many years. I've been in startups for the last 15 years, basically my entire career. And I really learned about Ethereum the first time, 14, 15, and then kind of started full time in crypto in 2017. And for me, the moment that made it all click was when I really started thinking about what can you use smart contracts for that you can't really use regular tech today. And it was just the idea that you can actually program money was just super powerful. And so that's when in 2017, I just decided to go into crypto full time. And actually was also when we started Centrifuge. I worked in fintech before. And one of the things I experienced firsthand was just how inefficient and shitty the financial system is. And so we had a very broad idea of, okay, there's probably a way that people can use crypto to trade together, exchange transactions, borrow, lend money, etc., using open blockchains. And for us, it was always very important that this was done on an open blockchain because, a lot of times, in the traditional financial system, you have very large banks controlling most of the transaction and taking most of the fees. And if you're especially a small borrower or lender, usually you don't have a lot of negotiating power. And we wanted to kind of change that and just make this market more accessible.
Can you tell us, how did you start Centrifuge and why did you choose Polkadot?
So to give you a bit of context, when we started Centrifuge, Tether, I think, was live, but stablecoins were very small. And on Ethereum, that was before Maker went live. It was before Uniswap was live. It was DeFi as a word didn't exist back then. So it was very early, and we kind of kept working on this project. We looked at NFTs to represent individual assets. We were building kind of experimental smart contracts on Ethereum, did a few things. And then I think 2019, we made the decision to actually try to look for something that's a bit more scalable than mainnet Ethereum. And mind you, L2s were not a thing back then. People were talking about Plasma and state channels. And so it was, for us, there are a few things that we liked about Polkadot. First of all, it was the scalability. And second of all, it was the ability to customize with a language that was more powerful than Solidity. And then the third reason was that upgradability and strong ideas around governance, because that one of the big challenges of Ethereum today and already back then, in my opinion, was that it's very hard to kind of innovate because it's so hard to upgrade the network, and we didn't want to be limited to that. And so that's what I really liked about the fact that kind of Substrate came with built-in very powerful tools to do runtime upgrades right on a regular basis. Substrate runtime upgrades, you can do those so much faster than an Ethereum upgrade. Now, to where we are today, I think in the end, it's definitely going to be a multi-chain world. People will have assets wherever they are, right? Whether that's Ethereum, Polkadot, or an L2 or another chain. And so Centrifuge, I would say, is we kind of have two products. We have a product that's built on Substrate that is used by the issuers to kind of do a lot of the powerful computation that we need, that we can't do on a lot of the Ethereum-based, EVM-based chains. And then we also have kind of hooks into other ecosystems so that users can just kind of use Centrifuge wherever they want to use it. So we do a bit of both today.
Let's talk about real world assets. Why do you think those are important to get on the blockchain?
When you read the Bitcoin white paper, or when you look at the Genesis block of Bitcoin was a reference to the 2009 financial crisis. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I think Bitcoin and many crypto projects are started with the goal to impact and build an alternative to the financial system, but that you can't build an alternative to the financial system if you can't use assets that exist today, right? We will always have real estate. We will always have to buy and sell cars to get around the world. We will always have to kind of interact with the real world. So for me, that was always the focus of Centrifuge, was like, okay, there's this DeFi and there's this way to do transactions on chain. How do we like enable kind of like seamless interaction between the on-chain and off-chain world? And so in the end, for me, like crypto won't serve its purpose if we don't actually manage to build tools for people to use with the assets they have today. And that's that's the very basic idea of real world assets. But then to go one step further, right, like there's finance is extremely inefficient. There's many intermediaries that are like, first of all, charging fees for no reason. Second of all, they're also very analog. They use emails and spreadsheets instead of like having really connected software. And I think that is like a big part where when you look at traditional assets, whether that's like a real estate fund or like a bond offering by a company, like the back office cost of this is so high for really not a lot of reasons, and that's something that we can replace with smart contracts. That's what we're effectively doing.
So let's talk about your partnership with Aave. We've seen a lot of posts. I'm not going to say tweets anymore because we're using X now, no longer Twitter. So I've seen a lot of posts on X regarding your partnership with Aave and how you're going to work together to make real world assets a reality, but also how DeFi is going to play a big role into this. So can you please share more info on that?
I think there's two interesting things about it. So one thing I want to about Centrifuge is I said we want to make those real world assets usable on chain, right? And what does it mean? It means that actually that you can use those in other DeFi protocols. So we were like the first real world asset onboarded to Maker, and to date we have about 200 million in total debt ceiling, and our users have 200 million available in credit from MakerDAO itself. And now for the last couple of months, we've been working more closely with Aave, although we've worked with them in the past, to actually first start with a treasury investment from their treasury into T-bills. And then in the long term, the goal is to actually back Go, their stablecoin, with real world assets. And like, I actually think Aave is always one of the examples that I use when I talk about how DeFi is already kind of providing a better user experience than TradFi. So repo markets in the traditional world is where I say, I'm going to give you this Apple bond and I need cash for the next 5 days. Here's the collateral. I would like some dollars, right? Or like, here's a treasury bill. I need some cash. Can I borrow against it? And those are the repo markets, and effectively, or money markets. And effectively, Aave is an on-chain money market, right? Now, the difference between Aave and a bank that does this is in Aave, you pay gas, and blockchains today are still not scalable enough that this is really, really cheap. But already there's like zero human intervention, and it's by the second on fully automated. You can go and basically do the same transaction that you would do today, paying a bank a huge margin with Aave without paying any margin, right? Directly paying your interest to other lenders. And so like talking about like real world assets and DeFi, why I think this is so exciting, right? Like Aave as a protocol, that money market, and now the stablecoin, right? Like those are like not nearly as scalable, not nearly as like, not only covering like a very small part of finance today, but in that part, they're already like offering a better product, right? So if we can like make these real world assets available to those, to use those things, then like we're actually building something really cool that's useful for everyone.
Let's talk about the tokenomics a bit with regards to Centrifuge. And one of the, I wouldn't say concerns, but more like questions that were raised in the community were regarding Centrifuge and staking, the CFG coin. Will staking ever be available for Centrifuge, or do you see any downsides to enabling staking?
How would you describe staking?
So you need to secure the network. And if you want to secure the network, you need to incentivize validators in order to do that.
So the reason I asked you this is because I think many people are kind of short-sighted on staking, because really a lot of these projects that have like very high staking rates, what they're doing is they're just inflating the token supply and giving that to people at stake without really providing enough value, right? Like in Polkadot, you don't really need, collators have a very, very small task in the network and should be very inexpensive. There's no reason to have collator selection be like a proof of stake mechanism. That's wasting money effectively. The other thing with staking that I always try to tell people is like, right, like if everyone's able to get 5% staking returns, then no one is getting 5% staking returns, because it's inflation, right? Like if everyone gets 5% interest in treasury bills, then no one is getting 5%, because everyone just has 5% more at the end of the year and everything's going to cost 5% more. So I think in that regard, like I do think staking is a bit overused and people are not thinking about really what the incentives are. I can say what the Centrifuge token model is. The Centrifuge token model is that users of Centrifuge, issuers, are paying protocol fees. That's a governance proposal that has been passed. It's in implementation. It'll go live probably before the end of the year, from like what I can see on the engineering side. Maybe it'll take a bit longer. So that means actually that those protocol fees go into the treasury controlled by the DAO, and that's a way that users are paying and the CFG token is getting utility, right? Without having to use some, in many instances, in my opinion, nonsensical staking. Staking makes sense if you have something at risk, right? And if you have something at risk, that does mean you can lose money. And only then should you actually get paid. So with proof of stake in Polkadot, if a validator screws up, you lose money. With proof of stake in Ethereum, it's the same thing, right? With collators, that doesn't really apply. So I think a lot of those collator staking mechanisms there's not really any slashing conditions, so it's completely useless. And then in other places, I think it's just like you also have to ask yourself, well, if you want to stake, can you actually do the work that you need to do? So for example, one thing we are doing, and we've been discussing that a lot in the governance forum, and it's still a project that we're researching, and I think I invite anyone to join this discussion, is just staking for pools, so that basically staking can be used as a selection mechanism to basically indicate to other users which pools have a high level of trust. And that's something that I think makes sense, right? But then you also have to ask yourself, so if you're starting to stake to pools and you now take risk that if those pools don't actually work out, that you lose your tokens, you should probably only stake if you can assess how well this pool is structured. So like personally, I wouldn't feel comfortable staking to a real estate pool saying I'm the real estate expert, because I'm obviously not. There's people maybe on our team, maybe in finance in general, in the Centrifuge community, that maybe are equipped to do that. But like for me to stake to something like that, right? Like I'm still taking a risk, and I have to be aware of that. And so I think like that's like the challenge with staking. But on the flip side, just because you don't do anything with the token, you simply hold it, doesn't mean the token is worthless or useless, right? Because we do have pools paying protocol fees, and those fees go ultimately to the network that is controlled by the token holders. And so in the end, whether you hold for whatever reason you hold CFG, right? Like that is like staking doesn't have to be the only reason that you hold it.
Right, but I want to ask you, that's actually a very interesting take. So thank you for sharing that. Now we can go into this a bit deeper. So I want to ask you regarding the validators. You were saying that it shouldn't cost them so much to validate the network, right? Because at the moment, let's face it, like some of the VPS costs can be quite high, maybe even outweighing the value that they're getting from those staking rewards, from those stakes, from the nominators that they're getting. So you made a really good point there. But now I need to ask you, what about Centrifuge? Like, in order to keep the network alive, how are you incentivizing those validators? And
I mean, we don't have
who are those validators? Are they part of the team, or are they like independent?
So the validators are Polkadot validators, and people stake DOT for them, right? The way Polkadot has Polkadot gives parachain security, so that means they provide a set of validators that validate your transactions. And so Centrifuge, like every other parachain, the network is secured by the Polkadot validators. So there's not, and the way that parachains pay for that is by leasing a parachain slot today, and I'm sure you've heard about the proposals to change to core time, which would mean that instead of doing basically doing a deposit, you would pay a kind of a monthly fee to the network, right? Yeah. So that's how the Centrifuge network is secured, how the Moonbeam network is secured, how every other parachain network is secured. Now there is a function that you still need to have, which is you need to have collators. Yeah, collators they can't change history though. They can't change past transactions. The only task they have is each block, a collator is selected and they propose which transactions go into the next block. Yeah. For Centrifuge and every other parachain to continue, only one of those collators has to be honest and has to actually include transactions. It can be 99 out of 100, can be offline, fraudulent, like refusing to do service, and the network will, like the parachain will still continue. Wow. So I didn't know that. So it's very the performance will be degraded, but basically you can just replace collators that are not producing blocks. So the other thing, they can only censor you as long as someone else doesn't include your transaction, right? So it's actually very it's not really something that they can benefit much from in most instances, and it's not that important of a job. So we do have a very decentralized set of collators. The process that we have is that governance chooses them, and you can go to the governance forum and propose to be accepted as a collator. You start in Altair, you kind of build your reputation there, you start getting paid in Air and CFG then, and then you can get included into the collator set on Centrifuge. I can tell you today we have 10 collators that are live. There are 7 that are not from the team that is building Centrifuge. Anyone from PathRocket, Polkadotters, Good Karma, Stakerspace, Stakecraft, Riabina, right? Many both validators and like other community members. And so
I need to ask you, how are these people getting rewarded from
they're
where?
Getting rewarded in CFG.
But how? From which pool? From which?
The treasury.
From the treasury. Okay, so that's the plan. And how are you replenishing the treasury?
So the network has a 3% issuance a year, token issuance a year, that the token holders can vote on paying for collators. They can give it out as rewards for liquidity providers. That has been done in the past. They can use it to kind of give grants to contributors, right? So for example, the credit group, which does work on kind of reporting on how the pools are doing, and when pools want to launch, they review them. So for example, that's a function in the DAO that's paid from this. In the long run, right? Like today we have these rewards, and the protocol is still very early, so the protocol fees that are generated don't offset the issuance. So you could kind of say we're still investing into the growth of the network with issuance. In the long term, though, the goal obviously is though that actually protocol fees are going to be higher, and we don't actually need the issuance anymore. In fact, the goal is that the token supply is at some point deflationary, so that there's more fees being burned than like new CFG being issued. And that makes that of course makes like that makes the network kind of reach sustainability.
Okay, I understand. Thank you for explaining that. And I hope that clarified it for everybody else as well with regards to why we're not going to see Centrifuge staking. It does make sense what you're saying.
It might come at some point. The pool staking is a functionality that we're looking at. It's just still in very early research, but I think it's just important to know that it's not the only way that the network generates fees and revenue, right?
And it has raised a lot of questions about existing parachain teams now getting that inflation, especially the ones with like 10% annual inflation. That is, it is making it more questionable now with regards to this model that you just spoke about. How is the Centrifuge team doing in terms of financial sustainability going forward? I don't need to know amounts, but just in terms of time frame, how long can you afford to pay developers to continue building on that roadmap and hitting those milestones?
We've been pretty, we have runway of more than a year in terms of our token treasury and stablecoins. We are pretty well off, I would say. We've been, I mean, what is public is that we've done a few investment rounds in 21 and 22. So I think that is something that you can look at online. And so yeah, what I can say is like we have plenty of energy and fuel or money to keep going for another couple of years.
Okay, that sounds good. I'm happy to hear
that. And we have revenue coming into the protocol, right, with those changes, which I think is really good, because it's not just money coming in, but it's also an important proof point that actually the product we're building is valuable, because we do have users that are willing to pay for the service and the network is providing, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for sharing. That's good to hear. It gives us more peace of mind as well. Now let's talk about upcoming features that you're excited to share.
It's this feature or this product that we're building, where basically DAOs can kind of manage their treasury with it, right? And there's a lot of it is kind of DAO to DAO governance process, but then there's also features around just automated portfolio construction, like make it much easier for dollars to flow into Centrifuge and ultimately like grow TVL. And then the other thing is the work we're doing with Chronicle Labs, which is the Maker Oracle team, or former Maker Oracle team. They're, after Chainlink, probably the biggest Oracle protocol. They've been around longer than Chainlink, actually. And we're working with them basically to like bring oracles to our pool, so that you can have kind of trustless third-party data, which I think is quite valuable in the long run.
Let's just talk about the challenges with regards to Centrifuge that you might have encountered along the way when you came to development. If you could maybe share some of those.
Oh, there's quite a few learnings we've made, because we've been doing this for a very long time, right? I think a more recent challenge, especially in Polkadot, of course, is that until recently, most of our users use USDC. And so we are only really just now launching our main product on the parachain, because it's all on Ethereum today, because USDC wasn't available until now. I think that's a big one, and more recent. I think, of course, something that I'm very happy is kind of changing is that, like, it used to be that DeFi yields were very inflated through very unsustainable ways, and so that made it very, very hard for like us to actually build what we were building, because we can't compete with inflated DeFi rates, because ultimately those real world borrowers, if they have to pay more in DeFi than in TradFi, then they're not going to use DeFi, right? They're not going to borrow money from DeFi. And so I think that's like now been corrected, which is good, because like otherwise it's kind of, it's like if everyone is subsidizing the industry, then you can't make money in it, and it makes it hard for everyone to actually make money. And so that's changing, so I'm happy about that.
Cool. I do have one final question. This is not related to Centrifuge or crypto, and that is, what is one thing in life that you truly desire?
Wow. Outside of crypto, there's a lot of stuff in crypto that I desire. Actually, I mean, in crypto, I definitely want to see the next 10 years and see how like it'll go from being a very novel, hard to use technology to being ubiquitous. Like the fact that I have like the internet on my watch is something that like 30 years ago people couldn't imagine, right? And I think that is something in crypto that I'm just looking forward, and kind of having seen this with the internet, like I know how like crazy it will be to think of like how this will happen in crypto. And then the other thing, I guess I really like to climb mountains, so there's a few mountains that I still want to climb.
Everest?
Not Everest. I think that's no. I like less trafficked, small, still still challenging mountains. Maybe not quite as challenging as Everest, but yeah. Europe has 100 peaks over 4,000 meters. Wow. I think around 100. Switzerland alone has 86, so definitely more than 100. There's plenty to do in Europe.
Absolutely. Cool. Thank you very much, Lucas. I appreciate you taking the time to join, and you've also taught us some new things that maybe we didn't know about. So thank you very much. If you want to check out Centrifuge, by the way, I will be posting links both in the description of this video and also in the pinned comment. And make sure to follow them on X, because that's where you get the latest updates. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.